Hey guys, Mike here with Crazy Cyber, and in today's video we are going to be fixing the Flipper Zero API mismatch error that is received with a lot of different custom firmware. Fixing this error is going to allow you to use the super cool stuff available for the Flipper, like UberGuidoz set of files that have things like the Bluetooth Trigger attack, and as well as a bunch of other cool stuff that does not work with the official Flipper Zero firmware. So we're going to go ahead and get into it, and I'm going to show you guys how to fix this. Alright guys, so if you're watching this video, most likely what's happening is you saw some cool files that you wanted to add to your Flipper Zero, but when you tried to use them, you got this error message. Or the message was slightly different and it said something like API is too old, or it's not an official firmware app, or something along those lines. And the easiest and fastest way that I found to fix this error and get non-official files to work is to change the firmware of the Flipper Zero to the Dark Flipper's Unleashed Firmware. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's super simple, super easy, and can be done in less than 15 minutes. Alright guys, so here we are at the desk with my personal Flipper Zero. And what you're going to need from this video is obviously a Flipper Zero. You would not be watching this if you didn't have one, so this is probably unnecessary, but you know how it is. Okay, so you're going to need a Flipper Zero, and also you are going to need a data USB-C cable to plug your Flipper into your PC and allow it to talk to the QFlipper application, which is what we're going to use to install the Unleashed firmware. Obviously, in addition to this cable, you're going to need a PC and you're going to need the QFlipper application. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started, and I'm going to show you guys how to fix the API mismatch error. Now in this video we are going to be going over two different ways to fix it. We're going to be going over the way I fixed it, which I think is the easiest. And in addition to it being the easiest way, you also get a ton of extra features and greatly extend the capabilities of your Flipper Zero. And that is by installing the Unleashed firmware and using that as the firmware on the Flipper Zero instead of the official firmware. And in order to be able to do the cool things with your Flipper, like the Bluetooth trigger attacks and the actually cool bad USB attacks, Wi-Fi stuff, and use all those cool scripts, they're not going to work with the stock firmware. And I think a lot of people are having this issue, and so I decided that I would, serve the community and make a video on it for anybody who maybe isn't so technically inclined and just kind of wants to have a cool device that can do some cool stuff but doesn't really want to get into learning how to code and writing their own scripts and stuff like that. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to begin the video by installing the QFlipper application. Alright guys, so our first step in this process is to download the QFlipper application, which is the Flipper's official app that is used to transfer files on the Flipper, as well as perform several other functions like creating a backup and restoring, viewing logs, and several other things as well. So we're going to go ahead and just Google QFlipper, and we're going to go to the official Flipper Zero page for the application. You can see there's a couple other different options for this, but we're going to go to the official page. So the application is available for the major platforms like Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. So depending on what your operating system is, go ahead and click whichever one of these is your platform and then download the application. Now, I already have the QFlipper application installed on my PC. So what you would just do is, obviously like any other download, you would just click on the download from your downloads tab, and then you just click through the steps. It's very simple. It doesn't do anything crazy to your computer, and the installation does not take long at all. So you can see I already have it installed right there. We're going to go ahead and open it up. So this is the screen that's always greeting you as soon as you open the app. And once you connect your Flipper, you will have all the options to transfer files and install firmware, and all the other features that the application offers. So you can see I just plugged in my Flipper and it changed. So we have the install option on the right in the middle, and that is for the firmware. And you can see the install from file option beneath the large button, and that's the one that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a TGZ file. So now we're going to navigate to the Unleashed Firmware, and we're going to find that, and we're going to download the TGZ file. So at first, because of my inexperience, I was kind of having trouble finding the TGZ file. And you can see you can download it as a zip, but that does not work. You need the TGZ file. So right now I'm going to be navigating to that, so you guys can either follow along, or I will post a link in the description and you can just click that. That'll probably be a lot easier. So you can see here that this has the instructions on installing the firmware using QFlipper with the TGZ file, and these are the instructions that you want to follow. So we're going to go ahead and navigate to the TGZ file, and we're going to click on it to download. Okay, so here I click the file and it takes a couple seconds, but we begin the download of the TGZ file that we need to put the QFlipper, to put the Unleashed firmware onto the Flipper using QFlipper. So once that is downloaded, here I just put it right on my desktop, and that works. You can put it wherever works best for you. Most people have a place that they're used to putting their files that they're going to use, or organize them in their own way. So next thing, we're going to go get the UberGuidoz files, and these are the files that have the Rogue Master and all the other cool FAP files that do some really cool stuff, like the Wi-Fi Marauder, the Bluetooth Trigger, as well as a bunch of other tools and applications that can definitely come in handy, like Caesar Cipher or the Morse code application. Really cool firmware. UberGuidoz is a really cool guy. He took the time out of his day to message me back on Reddit. I had originally asked him about the API mismatch error, and he got back to me, but I fixed it like 10 minutes after I messaged him. And we're gonna go over his write-up, that he wrote something on how to fix the API mismatch on his page, in the application section that you see there on the left side. If you click that, there's a little bit on the API mismatch errors. So the best way to do this is, I'm just showing you guys the files and just showing you that like the cool ones are in these folders. But what you're gonna really have to do is download the files as a zip file, and then extract them, and then you can add the ones you want to the Flipper using the QFlipper application. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed this process up, and then we're gonna get to the good stuff, which is actually installing it on the Flipper. Okay, so we got our UberGuidoz files downloaded, and we'll deal with that later. So we're going to go back to the QFlipper application, and we're going to install the firmware. So to do this, we're going to click Install from File on the bottom right corner of the application. Then we're going to navigate to wherever we had our TGZ file, and we are going to double click that, and then the QFlipper application will install that firmware from the TGZ file. I'm not going to show the installation process now because I already have the Unleashed firmware already installed on my Flipper, and I don't want to have to go back and reorganize the files. But that will reorganize everything, or sorry, it will install it for you. And then once that's installed, you can extract your files from the UberGuidoz repository and add them. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Okay, so as you guys just saw, I was just kind of going through the UberGuidoz files and showing you all the cool stuff. Now I'm going to show you how to put just the individual files on your QFlipper. So you're going to go navigate over to your QFlipper application, and then in the top left you see the three options: the information, the wrench, and the document. You're going to click the document and then double click your SD card, and as you can see, these are all the files that are on your Flipper. Then you just drag and drop whatever files that you want from that specific repository, and you just drop them into that window, and the Flipper Zero will add them automatically and do whatever it needs to do to put them on the SD card. So you'll see in just a second, I'm going to pick one up and drop one in there, and you can actually see the process of the Flipper adding those files to the SD card, and therefore, you know, have them be available for use on the Flipper. So I recommend you guys really kind of look through the UberGuidoz files, because there's just so many cool ones, and you know, you might even consider just adding all of them. The Unleashed firmware does come with a lot of stuff, but the UberGuidoz files has some stuff that does not come with the Unleashed firmware. So it's definitely worth looking through and find some stuff that you might use on a daily basis. If you, like, say for instance you have some sort of parking gate or something like that at your university, and you know, just sub gigahertz that bit and just get in there. So this is the files being added, and I just do this, you know, a couple more times just to show the process, but I'm sure by now you guys get the picture. So now your Flipper is going to have the Unleashed firmware, and you'll be able to use the cool files, and you will not get the API mismatch error anymore, because the APIs, I guess, match up between these two, and the Flipper Zero official firmware does not. So here I am showing you guys my favorite personal file from UberGuidoz, which is the kitchen sink, which basically when you run it, any device in the area just starts getting like constant Bluetooth device found pop-ups, and you can't back out of them. Well, you can back out of them, but another one just immediately pops up. It's kind of like a denial of service in a way, because you can't use your device at all. They just keep popping up. And there are a ton of cool features in this repository and in this firmware. Big shout out to UberGuidoz for creating this and making it available to the community for free. Super cool of them. I'm sure this took a ton of work, and at this point in my skill set, this is far above my head, so definitely huge props to him. So that last item disconnected my Flipper, but as soon as I stopped it, it reconnected. And you know, we're just going through the files, which you guys can do on your own, but you can see there's a lot of cool stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show you guys the end result, and then we'll move on to the message that UberGuidoz sent me on Reddit, and I'll show you guys how to navigate to his article on the API mismatch error. Alright guys, so these are the Reddit messages that I originally sent to Mr. UberGuidoz when I was still in the process of trying to figure out why it wasn't working. And he sent me this message right here, and he sent me the link to it, to another way that you can fix the API mismatch. I'm going to go ahead and post that link in the description. But he also said that he wrote something about it on the applications page, and so this is that right here. So if you don't want to, put an unofficial firmware on your flipper, you can most likely go to that application or website that he recommended, and you can solve that API error that way. In my opinion, it's just so much easier to just throw the Unleashed Firmware on there, and not only will you not get the API mismatch error, but I personally feel the interface is a lot cooler, and it does come with some added functionality. If you really like the files that Mr. UberGuidoz created, you can, give him a donation on his GitHub repository, and help him out. I mean, he wrote some pretty amazing files and gave them to the community for free, so he definitely deserves it. Everything that I mentioned in this video will be linked in the description. The QFlipper application, the link to the website that Mr. UberGuidoz sent me, both the Unleashed Firmware and the UberGuidoz repository. So I hope you guys, if you're having this issue, you're able to get it solved, either by the Unleashed Firmware or by the link that Mr. UberGuidoz sent. And I hope you guys have a lot of fun with your flipper. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Mike with Crazy Cyber, logging off.